Sean Diddy Combs is hit with a wave of new lawsuits when half a dozen new people come forward accusing Combs of rape, sexual assault, and sexual abuse. The civil lawsuits were filed on Monday, just days after the detained Combs appeared in court for his sex trafficking case. And to protect the identity of the accusers, the lawsuits were filed anonymously by 2 women identified as Jane Doe and 4 men identified as John Doe, including a minor. The new suits were the first batch of 120 alleged victims with claims against the embattled music mogul, which attorney Tony Busby announced earlier this month.
The biggest secret in the entertainment industry that really wasn't a secret at all has finally been revealed to the world. The wall of silence has now been broken, and victims are coming forward. Our team has had at this point more than 3,285 individuals contact us with people claiming to have been victimized by Sean Combs. After vetting, we now represent 120 individuals who intend to bring civil claims in civil court against Sean Diddy Combs, as well as claims against many other individuals and entities that we will name as defendants as we file these individual cases.
The latest filings span nearly 3 decades, from 1995 to 2021, and detail different accounts of horrific sexual assault. In 95, a woman says she attended a party for Notorious B.I.G.'s music video, One More Chance. It was there she claims Combs raped her in a bathroom. The woman said Combs brought her into the bathroom to talk privately and then began kissing her unexpectedly. She says she tried to pull away and he allegedly slammed her head into the wall, which caused her to fall to the floor. When she was on the floor, the producer allegedly hit her again, lifted her dress, and raped her. After, Combs allegedly threatened her by saying, "You better not tell anyone about this or you'll disappear." A John Doe says he was just 16 years old when the mogul fondled him at one of his white parties in 1998. The male plaintiff alleges Combs told him he had the look of a star and then ordered him to drop his pants. He claims Combs explained to him that it was a rite of passage to becoming a music star and allegedly asked him, "Don't you want to break into the business?" The then teen says he complied out of fear, anxiety, and the power imbalance he felt with Combs, and later realized what he says happened was sexual assault. In 2004, another Jane Doe alleges Combs raped her in a hotel room after he invited her and a friend there for a party. Combs allegedly gave them drinks and told them to snort cocaine. The woman, who was a freshman in college, says Combs forced her friend to perform oral sex on him and threatened to kill them if they didn't comply. In 2006, another John Doe, who was a security guard at the now infamous white parties, claims he was sexually assaulted by Combs. The man says he began to feel extremely ill at the party after drinking 2 drinks with alcohol that were provided by Combs. The accuser says he was disoriented and alleges the Bad Boy Records founder forcibly pushed him into an open van, held him down, and sexually assaulted him. In 2008, another man claims he was sexually assaulted by Combs in a New York Macy's. This John Doe says he was an advisor at Echo Clothing, a competitor of the mogul Sean John clothing line. He claims he was in a stockroom at Macy's in Manhattan when Combs and 3 bodyguards entered. Doe alleges he was turning a corner in the stockroom when he was hit around the base of the neck, possibly with a pistol. He says this forced him to his hands and knees, and he saw that each of Diddy's bodyguards had guns in their waistbands. The man alleges he heard multiple voices saying things like, "I'll kill you." Combs allegedly approached the man and forcefully, brutally, and orally raped him for at least 2 minutes. According to the suit, after Combs was finished, he threw Doe's head aside and said words to the effect of, "Shut up or I'll kill you." And in 2021, another man claims he was drugged and assaulted by Combs and multiple other unnamed men at a party. This John Doe says he became disoriented after a drink at a New York party. He claims he was trying to leave when he heard another man say, "Hold on," and promise to help him. Doe says he remembers being in a bedroom, unable to speak, move, or fight back. He says multiple men began sexually assaulting him through sodomy and other forced acts. The man says he distinctly remembers seeing Combs above him naked at one point during the assault. The male plaintiff says that he was sodomized by at least 3 men. Combs was already facing a number of civil lawsuits accusing him of sexual misconduct and other illegal activity, which he has denied all those allegations. The disgraced mogul, who remains locked up in a federal detention center in Brooklyn, has denied the recent allegations against him. Through his attorneys, they say, quote, Mr. Combs and his legal team have full confidence in the facts, their legal defenses, and the integrity of the judicial process. In court, the truth will prevail that Mr. Combs has never sexually assaulted anyone, adult or minor, man or woman. Well, we have a lot to break down with these lawsuits. So I want to bring on now criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson. Safa, always great to see you. You know, the allegations in these lawsuits are horrific. We have allegations of rape, sexual assault, and sexual abuse. Some incidents allegedly happened at Diddy's now infamous white parties, some happening in bathrooms, one even allegedly happening in a Macy's stockroom. What's been your reaction to these half a dozen lawsuits that were filed yesterday?
Thank you for having me, Elizabeth. These lawsuits don't come as a surprise, especially after the continuous filing of lawsuits in state court and federal courts against Mr. Combs. They all allege the same conduct or similar conduct. Some of that conduct has been alleged in the RICO indictment against Mr. Combs in federal court. So these lawsuits are not a surprise, and I think that we're going to continue to see more as time comes along. So definitely not a surprise here.
And this wave of lawsuits kind of echo the previous lawsuits filed against Sean Combs, aka Diddy, where he allegedly exudes a power to get what he wants, again, allegedly. But this is kind of different in the sense you have four John Does who have filed suits against him, one of which was just 16 years old when he was allegedly assaulted by Diddy. What are your thoughts on the men who filed the lawsuits against Diddy? And although they filed the suits under anonymity, do you think they did it because they felt safe enough to tell their story with Diddy behind bars until trial?
I think a part of the reason that they've been filing as John and Jane Does is in part to protect the integrity of their case. I think we've seen recently that there was a lawsuit that was filed on behalf of a woman who I think maybe was at a party or something of that nature with Mr. Combs. And ultimately, there became some questions about the integrity of her lawsuit and whether or not what she was alleging was in fact true or correct. There were also some questions on whether or not witnesses were bribed in that particular case. I think a boyfriend or something of that sort, who may have been allegedly bribed to go along with her story. So now the attention is on that individual. So I think that individuals are now filing under Jane and John Doe's to protect the integrity of their cases, to protect their identities in the meantime. Also, these are very sensitive cases and topics. So rape allegations, sexual abuse, particularly for men, are not as often easily to discuss. So that's also a question or a reason for the anonymity in this case, or in these cases.
And can any of these allegations in this new wave of lawsuits be used against Diddy in his federal trial? And can any of these does be called as witnesses?
I think that they can certainly be called as witnesses, and I'm sure the U.S. Attorney is going to take a look at what these lawsuits are alleging, speak to these individuals to see if there's anything that they can use in their prosecution. I think that the U.S. Attorney's Office has casted a wide net with regard to obtaining evidence and search warrants and things of that nature. So I think they're generally familiar with who the victims or the alleged victims are in these complaints, and what the evidence particularly may say or may show, which is why we're here. The RICO indictment alleges sexual abuse. It alleges drug assaulting, things of that nature. So again, these lawsuits don't come as a surprise. They essentially echo what's in the RICO indictment in the federal prosecution. And so I think that the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to take a look at these lawsuits, speak to these individuals, and then decide how they want to proceed forward with them, if they haven't already.
And in these allegations, you have allegations of other people also being around during these incidents. What does that tell you just about the brazenness of Diddy's alleged actions to just kind of do it out in the open while other people were around?
Mr. Combs has been in this industry for quite some time. And, I'm assuming that the individuals who work with him have been well-trusted individuals, in his mind. Of course, they've worked with him, they've worked for him, whether they're security guards or, assistants and things of that nature. So my guess is that they've had a relationship that's been, nourished with trust. And so it's not a surprise that he, if it is true, would allegedly use these individuals to conduct some of the acts that he's alleged to have done. I would also note that this is a RICO indictment. They're alleging that he acted as a criminal enterprise, or him and other individuals acted as a criminal enterprise to engage in certain prohibited activity. So if that is true, then there are going to have to be other players that are in this that are going to have acted in concert with him.
And some people might just have the argument of why now? Why are they coming forward now? These allegations are spanning over 3 decades, going back the earliest in this new wave of lawsuits to 1995, the most recent one happening in 2021. What are your thoughts on people who kind of always question why do they come forward decades, years after these alleged incidents happened?
I think there's definitely strength in numbers. And in this case, it seems like, Ms. Cassie Ventura was the sounding board for how this all came to light by filing her lawsuit at the end of last year. And so as people themselves, allegedly have found themselves in certain situations, very similar situations, they are now finding the strength in numbers to be able to, tell their story, file their lawsuits, seek some sort of retribution on their own behalf. And I also do think that there is also a danger and a risk that, when individuals are seeing these number of lawsuits and the potential money and awards that they can gain, that, there may be some that may unfortunately take advantage. But with the real victims, or with the true victims, they find strength in numbers. And this happened to her. This happened to me too. I'm ready to tell my story, and essentially seek justice on their own behalf.
And talk to me a little bit about what all goes into filing a civil complaint against someone like Sean Combs. How long does that process take from the moment you walk into an attorney's office to the point the attorney files the lawsuit?
So when an individual wants to file a lawsuit against someone like Mr. Combs, they of course go in and meet with an attorney. That attorney gains all the facts and evidence, and then they file what we call a summons and complaint. They file that summons and complaint in the appropriate jurisdiction. More likely than not, my guess is going to be that these are going to be cases that are filed in federal court if they live in separate jurisdictions from Mr. Combs, and if the amount in controversy is a significant amount. So they file a summons and complaint. They have to put Mr. Combs on notice, so they have to serve him essentially, or his agent, his attorney, whoever is the designated individual, that it needs to be placed on notice that, hey, you're being sued. They then file an answer to those complaints, and then the case begins to take a life of its own. So after the summons and complaints are filed, and there's some communication between the attorneys, exchanges of discovery, there's going to be depositions that are taken in this case, which is when the other side, the defendant or the plaintiff's attorney, will question the other individuals involved in the case and give those answers on the record. Ultimately, at the end of the case, they are entitled to a trial if it makes it that far. A lot of times these cases do settle out of court. They can settle through mediation, they can settle through settlement agreements. And so a lot of times these civil cases may not ultimately see, a courtroom or a jury, because they've settled before that.
And I just wanted to ask you this. A lot of people, when these lawsuits are filed against celebrities, that the accusers are always being accused of just filing this lawsuit for a quick payday. But with Diddy, who is behind bars, assuming that all of his money right now is kind of tied up in his sex trafficking trial, what type of outcome do you think is actually realistic for the alleged victims in this case? Because I'm inclined to believe that they're not here for a payday. I think they're here to let their story be heard, to tell their story. But again, what are your thoughts on just what the victims are kind of hoping for as in terms of justice by filing these lawsuits?
I think first and foremost, these individuals are looking for a space to be heard. They're looking for justice. They're looking to tell their story and their experience, and to find some solace and solidarity with other individuals who have also had the same experience. Not only that, but with respect to, any financial gain or financial award that they may receive on this. Of course, Mr. Combs' assets, I'm sure, are tied up with other things, lawyer fees, things of that nature. With respect to the award as well, there's going to be a question of whether they will see that money, or at what point they may see those funds. If there is an award in this case, I think that there may be some forfeiture proceedings with respect to Mr. Combs' case. I'm not 100% sure, but I do believe that I did see that. And so, of course, the government is going to take financially and things like that before anybody else will even have an opportunity to gain any financial award.
And Diddy, even though he's behind bars, as we all know, has denied the allegations against him. As his attorneys say in part, quote, in a statement, in court, the truth will prevail that Mr. Combs has never sexually assaulted anyone, adult or minor, man or woman. What are your thoughts and what do you make of that statement, kind of denial here?
Mr. Combs certainly has a right to remain silent. He's entered a not guilty plea to the charges, and that is certainly well within his right. And his attorneys are right. At the end of the day, this has to play out in court at a trial. It's the government's burden to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, call in the appropriate witnesses if they want to seek a conviction on this case. It's one thing to allege something against an individual, and it's one thing for an individual to be charged with a crime, but it's another thing to actually be convicted. And at trial, things happen. Witnesses may appear, they may not. Stories change, and there are a lot of things that play into once trial day and the trial weeks, and in this case is probably going to take months on trial, actually happens. But he certainly has that right to remain silent. I expect that he's going to continue to exercise that right. His defense team or his defense attorney, I anticipate, will be exploiting those witnesses that do get on the stand to testify against him at trial if it makes it that far.
All right. Well, Safa Robinson, I always appreciate your insight into these cases that we cover here. Before we sign you off, anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you for having me today.
Sean Combs remains behind bars at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York. He's pleaded not guilty to charges of sex trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, and transportation to engage in prostitution. His next court date is slated for December. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.